The thesaurus of the notion of territory is a very important issue. If to start with the question, what do you mean by territory, then I remember a seminar in Stockholm at the Royal Institute of Technology when I was a PhD student. And Professor Mattsson asked us a question during the seminar. What are the attributes of any territory? At that time my answer was that any territory should have some area, boundaries and status. The professor agreed in general, but he substituted status with property rights. And he provided some examples of territories. Apartment, a multifamily building, land parcel, region, country. Similarly, I remember another seminar where my colleague, Mr. Poash, asked the audience a question, what do you mean by land parcel? The answers were very different, from a polygon to a bundle of rights and the object of maintenance. So the opinions are very different. As for the theoretical, for the conceptual basis of my thinking, I think that I use a definition from Wikipedia. A territory, from the word terra, meaning land, is a defined area, including land and waters, considered to be a possession of a person, organization, institution, animal, state, or country subdivision. Of course, there are national peculiarities of understanding of this notion. We know this administrative specificity in American, Canadian, French, and so on context. Yeah, one more example. Once I read an Italian paper in English, scientific paper, and I met the term territorialization. It was a bit unclear to me what does it mean. I could understand that it's the act of organizing as a territory, but what it was before. So national aspects are important also. Coming back to the overall definition, we see that territory has a root terra, which means land. And if to use the United Nations land administration guidelines, we can find the following definition of land. Land is the surface of the earth, the material beneath, the air above, and all things fixed to the soil. As for the applied research and the main axis of analysis around the term territory, I can say that when I was a researcher and practitioner in land valuation, in particular in land assessment, which is land valuation for taxation purposes, at that time the concept of territory was rather an abstract one. I mean that at that time I was thinking about a GIS polygon which has some precise boundaries, and at that time the task was to divide the territory into land value zones and to calculate land value. So of course it was important if the territory were densely populated or if there were no inhabitants at all, but in general it was not the focus. So the legal definition of territory prevailed. Later this imagination was changed by a bit more complicated view. So a territory, I considered a territory as a multi-layer GIS model. And now I'm involved in urban modeling. And when I think about the territory, the notion of territory now, first and foremost I think about population and employment. I work with transportation and land use modeling, and our task now is to create a model which describe the complexity of interactions between different actors in the area, like population, jobs, urban environment, like transportation network, built areas, and so on. And the environmental component is also very important, of course, like the quality of air, etc. Of course, any model of territory, and I'm saying about model of urban territory, is just a rough simplification of more complicated reality. But with these models, anyway, we should try to understand the nature, and we should try also to predict future development in order to recognize the potential conflicts, because in this sense territory has a social component. A social system always earlier or later leads to a conflict, and with this kind of modeling we should try to help, if not to avoid, then at least to solve some conflicts. I work with urban modeling using GIS, but I'm not a geographer according to my education, so I'm not really familiar with geographical definitions of territory. And if to be within the limits of the legal concept of territory, then I see the problem in not including population in this definition. Population, or if to think about biology, it could be species, or if to think about the cultural heritage, then it should be some cultural monuments or socio-economical environment of nowadays, and so on. And finally, I can say that this event, the International Conference of Territorial Intelligence, is a fine possibility to see different specialists, both researchers and practitioners, to listen different opinions, to know better people from other fields, and hopefully to increase the limits of the definition of territory, making it more interdisciplinary. Well, thank you for your attention.